The Galactic Council chamber was silent. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in their seats, their eyes fixed on the massive screen at the center of the hall. A new transmission had just arrived. It was from Earth. The message was simple, yet its meaning sent a chill through every being in the room. Do not touch our alien friends. There will be no second warning. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then murmurs spread across the hall. Some aliens looked at each other, confused. Others whispered in disbelief. Since when do humans give warnings? A reptilian delegate from the Korthan Empire scoffed. They have no empire, no great military. What makes them think they can threaten the galaxy? A member of the Xilari race, a small blue-skinned creature with 4 eyes, frowned. I heard humans are dangerous when provoked, he said. They fought among themselves for centuries before uniting. Maybe we should take this warning seriously. The room burst into laughter. Take humans seriously, sneered a Zarkan warlord, his armored body gleaming under the council lights. They are nothing. Their fleets are small, their influence weak. They think they can protect their so-called friends. We shall see. His eyes glowed with amusement as he turned to his second-in-command. Send the fleet, capture the Velari. The Velari were a peaceful race, known for their intelligence and technological advancements. They had no military, no defenses strong enough to stop an invasion. Recently, they had formed an alliance with Earth, seeking protection. But what could humans do? The Zarkans were one of the most feared warrior races in the galaxy. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems. They had conquered dozens of species. They had crushed entire civilizations. One small human warning would not stop them. On the Velari homeworld, the sky darkened as the Zarkan warships entered orbit. Their massive battleships hovered like silent monsters, blocking the sun. The Velari people looked up in fear, their hearts pounding. Then the first attack came. Fire rained from the sky. Cities burned. Ships tried to escape but were shot down before they could reach hyperspace. Families ran for shelter, but there was no safe place. The Velari knew they were doomed. But still, they sent one final transmission. A desperate call for help. A message to Earth. Thousands of light years away, in a secure command center on Earth, Admiral Jonathan Cole stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. The distress signal from the Velari played on the screen. He watched in silence as images of burning cities and fleeing civilians filled the room. A young officer turned to him. "Sir, the Zarkans have ignored our warning." Cole nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Zarkans were arrogant. They believed themselves unstoppable. The Admiral clenched his fists. The Velari were not human, but they were friends, and Earth had given its word. He turned to his officers. His voice was calm, but there was a deadly edge to it. They ignored our warning. Now they will learn why humans don't give second chances. The room fell silent. Then, with a single command, the entire human fleet prepared for war. Across the solar system, battleships powered up. Engines roared to life. Weapons systems locked in place. Soldiers boarded their ships, their faces grim. They all knew what this mission meant. Humanity had spoken once. Now it was time to act. As the fleet entered hyperspace, a final message was sent to the Galactic Council. Earth is coming, and for the first time in history. The galaxy was afraid. The Zarkan fleet loomed over the burning Velari cities, their warships casting long shadows over the ruins below. Fires raged across the landscape, smoke curling into the sky as terrified Velari scrambled for shelter. Their once thriving civilization was reduced to ashes in mere hours. Commander Varek stood at the bridge of his flagship, arms crossed over his massive chest, watching the destruction with satisfaction. "The humans are weak," he muttered. "They will do nothing." His second-in-command, a younger warrior named Kor, shifted uneasily. "And if they do, Commander?" Varek let out a deep, guttural laugh. "Then they will die like the rest." But far away, beyond the edges of the Zarkan fleet, something moved in the darkness of space. Silent, unseen, and waiting. Earth had received the Velari's call for help, and humanity was already here. At the edge of the Velari system, the void shimmered as dozens of massive ships tore out of hyperspace. They were sleek, black as the void itself, with no visible insignias, only cold, unmarked steel. The human fleet had arrived. Inside the lead battleship, the HSS Vengeance, Admiral Jonathan Cole stood before his command crew, his sharp eyes locked onto the enemy fleet displayed before him. "The Zarkans think we're weak," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Let's show them how wrong they are." Across the fleet, weapons powered up. Railguns hummed, laser arrays locked onto targets, and torpedoes sat ready in their launchers. But Earth did not fire. Not yet. Instead, a single transmission was sent to the Zarkan flagship. "This is Admiral Jonathan Cole of the United Earth Fleet. You were warned. Stand down or face the consequences." On the Zarkan bridge, Varek scoffed. "They come with threats? Against us." He grinned, his sharp teeth glinting under the red light of the command console. "Destroy them." Orders were barked. The Zarkan fleet adjusted course, weapons locking onto the human ships. They never got the chance to fire. Without warning, the HSS Vengeance launched its first salvo. Hypersonic railgun rounds tore through the void, crossing the distance between the fleets in a fraction of a second. The lead Zarkan destroyer shuddered as multiple impacts ripped through its hull. Explosions erupted across its structure before it was completely torn apart. A heartbeat later, the rest of the human fleet opened fire. Mass driver cannons thundered, spewing rounds that moved faster than sound itself. Guided missiles streaked across space, weaving between enemy ships before finding their marks. Zarkan vessels erupted into fireballs, their shields useless against the raw kinetic energy of human weaponry. The Zarkans had expected a fight. They had not expected annihilation. Panic spread across the Zarkan fleet. Their ships, built for brute force and overwhelming numbers, were outmatched. They relied on thick armor and brute strength. But human weapons did not care for armor. They punched through steel, through energy shields, through every layer of protection the Zarkans had. On the bridge of the Zarkan flagship, Varek's expression twisted into rage. "How?" he bellowed. Kor stared at the battlefield, his voice barely a whisper. "Sir, the humans. They fight like demons." For the first time in Zarkan history, an enemy was not running from them. The humans were hunting them, and they were winning. The battle lasted only minutes, but to the Zarkans, it felt like a lifetime. Their forces shattered, warships breaking apart under the relentless human assault. Desperate distress calls rang out across the fleet, but there was nowhere to run. The humans had surrounded them. A final transmission came through the Zarkan command channel. "You were warned." Then, the human fleet unleashed its full power. Explosions filled the void. The flagship of Commander Varek was the last to fall, torn apart in a fiery blast that sent shockwaves across space. Silence followed. The Zarkan fleet was no more. On the Velari homeworld, the surviving citizens looked to the sky. The monstrous Zarkan ships that had terrorized them were gone. Instead, human vessels hovered above, their massive forms blocking out the stars. Then a voice echoed through the ruins of the city. "The invaders are no more. You are safe." The Velari wept. For the first time in their history, someone had fought for them. And as the human fleet began their retreat, one thing became clear to the entire galaxy. Earth had given its warning, and Earth had kept its word. The galaxy would never be the same again. The wreckage of the Zarkan fleet drifted silently in the cold void of space, the once mighty warships reduced to little more than floating tombs. The battle was over, but the message it carried echoed across the galaxy. The United Earth Fleet had made one thing clear. Earth's warnings were not to be ignored. As the last flames flickered out in the remains of the destroyed vessels, The Velari people stood in awe and disbelief. They had prepared for extinction, for the loss of everything they had built. Instead, they found themselves under the unexpected protection of humanity. For the first time in history, an empire as ruthless as the Zarkans had been stopped, not by another empire seeking dominance, but by a species that fought for something greater than conquest. The news spread like wildfire. Across the stars, governments and warlords, diplomats and conquerors all turned their eyes toward Earth. And many of them were afraid. On board the HSS Vengeance, Admiral Jonathan Cole stood before the holographic war map. The battle against the Zarkans had been swift, decisive, but it had not gone unnoticed. Beside him, General Ava Carter, head of Earth's defense forces, studied the aftermath with quiet intensity. "We made our statement," she said. "The question is, what happens next?" Cole sighed, rubbing his temples. The galaxy isn't ready for what they just witnessed. Are we? The Admiral turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We don't have a choice." Humanity had spent centuries watching as larger, older civilizations carved up the stars, exploiting the weak, enslaving entire species. Earth had remained quiet, biding its time, observing. But now, the galaxy knew their strength, and soon it would test them. Far from the battlefield, in the core systems of the Zarkan Empire, Supreme Overlord Vesk stood before his war council. The air in the chamber was thick with tension. Never before had the Zarkans suffered such a catastrophic loss. Never before had an enemy reduced them to nothing in a single engagement. It was unacceptable. "The humans think they have won," Vesk growled, his claws digging into the stone table before him. "They believe they are untouchable." His piercing red eyes swept over his gathered generals. "I will not allow this insult to stand." One of the high-ranking commanders hesitated before speaking. "Overlord, with all due respect, the human fleet is unlike anything we've encountered. Their weapons, their strategies." Vesk slammed his fist down, silencing the room. "Then we find their weakness." The Zarkans were not a species that accepted defeat. They conquered, they crushed, and if brute force did not work, they adapted. "They protected the Velari," Vesk mused. "It means they have a weakness. They care." A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "And we will make them regret that." As Earth celebrated its victory, its leaders knew better than to grow complacent. In a secret war room beneath the United Earth Command Center, President Elias Monroe sat at the head of a council meeting. Generals, admirals, intelligence officers, all gathered to discuss the next move. The Zarkans were wounded, but they were not finished. And there were whispers that other empires, once uninterested in humanity, were now watching. A large screen displayed intercepted transmissions, messages from hidden informants and spies embedded deep within alien territories. Patterns emerged. Something was happening. "The Zarkans are rallying allies," an intelligence officer reported grimly. "They're reaching out to mercenary groups, pirate factions, rogue warlords. They're preparing for retaliation." Monroe steepled his fingers. "How long do we have?" "Not long." Silence hung over the room. Then, General Carter spoke. "We need to move first." Cole frowned. "You want to strike them now? If we wait, they'll come at us with everything they have. We can't afford to be reactive. We need to make sure their retaliation never happens." The president leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" Carter's expression was grim. "We take the fight to them." It was a dangerous plan. But Earth had already made its choice when it stood against the Zarkans. They could not back down now. Within days, fleets were mobilized. Intelligence operatives infiltrated enemy networks. War factories worked around the clock. Humanity was preparing for a war unlike any other. Not a war for territory. Not a war for power. A war for survival. And this time, Earth would not give a warning. This time, it would strike first. The cold vastness of space stretched endlessly, stars twinkling like distant watchers of history. But in one corner of the galaxy, History was being rewritten. The defeat of the Zarkan Empire at the hands of humanity was not just a battle, it was a message, a warning. And the galaxy was listening. Some listened in awe, others in fear. But for those who thrived in the darkness of war, it was an opportunity. In the lawless sectors of the galaxy, beyond the control of empires and federations, the news spread like wildfire. The great warlords, mercenary groups, and shadowy syndicates who profited from chaos saw Earth's sudden rise to power as a challenge. Among them was Drezek the Reaper, a name that sent chills through even the most hardened warriors. He was not an emperor, not a king. He was a force of nature, leading a fleet of the deadliest scavengers and exiles the galaxy had ever known. His base of operations, the Black Maw, was a floating fortress of stolen ships, welded together over centuries. Here, the Zarkans came with desperate pleas. "We will pay you handsomely," the Zarkan envoy hissed. "Humanity has made enemies of many. There are those who would see them fall." Drezek's cybernetic eye glowed red as he leaned forward, amused. "Humans," he mused, "fascinating creatures. They fight not for conquest, but for loyalty. It is unusual." The Zarkans snarled. "They are a threat to the old order. If they are not stopped now, they will become the rulers of the stars." Drezek grinned, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Then let's see if they can bleed." While the Zarkans gathered their forces, Earth was already moving. On board the HSS Shadowblade, Captain Rena Kale watched from the command deck as her ship drifted through the void, hidden from detection. The Shadowblade was one of Earth's deadliest weapons, a ghost in the dark, a blade in the night. Rena had received her orders: locate the Zarkans' new allies, find out what they were planning, and if necessary, ensure they never got the chance to act. Her ship's crew worked in silence, monitoring encrypted transmissions, tracking unusual fleet movements. "Captain," her intelligence officer called, "we've intercepted a signal. It's from the Black Maw." Rena's brow furrowed. "Put it on screen." The scrambled message played. A deep, guttural voice spoke in an alien tongue, but the meaning was clear. "The hunt begins." Rena's grip tightened. The Zarkans weren't just coming back with warships. They had hired killers. On the distant colony of Vega Prime, the first attack came without warning. A planet known for its bustling trade routes, Vega Prime was home to millions, humans and aliens alike. But as the sun set over the cityscape, shadows moved among the people. Explosions erupted in the marketplace. Buildings crumbled. Fires raged. And in the chaos, the assassins moved. Their target was Ambassador Daniel Hayes, a key diplomat responsible for forming alliances between Earth and several alien species. If he fell, it would send a message: humanity was vulnerable. But humanity had learned from its enemies. As the assassins closed in, a single voice cut through the comms of Earth's secret security forces: "Execute counterstrike." From the rooftops, hidden snipers fired. Drones emerged from the skies, unleashing precise, deadly force. The assassins, expecting an easy kill, found themselves in a trap. Within minutes, the attack was repelled, but the message had been received. This was no longer just a war. This was personal. The news of the assassination attempt reached Admiral Cole within hours. He stood in the war room, his expression hard as steel. Around him, holographic images displayed reports from intelligence officers. "The Zarkans are desperate," General Carter stated. "They're not just coming at us with warships. They're trying to destabilize us, weaken us before the real fight begins." Cole exhaled slowly. "Then we stop waiting." The table lit up, showing detailed maps of enemy space. "We've identified key Zarkan supply routes," one of the analysts reported. "If we hit them now, we cut off their ability to wage a prolonged war." Carter nodded. "We need to remind them that Earth doesn't just defend. We strike back." The president's voice came through the secure channel, firm and unwavering. "Then we move. Across the galaxy, fleets mobilized. The Zarkans prepared their invasion, gathering mercenaries, criminals, and warlords under their banner. Earth, however, was no longer waiting for the enemy to knock on its door. The fleet of humanity, battle-hardened and ready, set its course. This war would not be fought in Earth's backyard. This time, humanity was coming for them. The war had not yet begun, but the pieces were moving. The galaxy was shifting, alliances were being tested, and the darkness of space was preparing to swallow those who hesitated. In the heart of the solar system, Earth's leadership convened in a classified war room buried beneath the surface of Mars. The holographic displays flickered, showing intercepted transmissions, fleet movements, and enemy supply routes. Admiral Cole stood at the center, his gaze unwavering as he addressed the room. "They think we'll wait. They think we'll sit back and let them dictate the terms of this war," he said, his voice low but filled with steel. "They're wrong." Across the table, General Carter leaned forward. "Our counterintelligence has identified over a dozen warlords, mercenary groups, and Zarkan sympathizers preparing to strike. But they have one fatal weakness." A hologram shifted, highlighting a region of space near the Omega Nebula, the Black Maw. "This," Carter continued, "is where the worst of them gather. It's a den of outlaws, a fortress of criminals. And it's where the Zarkans have made their deal with Drezek the Reaper." The room fell silent. The name alone carried weight. Drezek wasn't just another warlord. He was a legend among killers, a man who had built his empire from the bones of fallen civilizations. If the Zarkans had recruited him, humanity was facing more than just an enemy fleet. They were facing an army of ghosts. Admiral Cole's expression remained unreadable. Then he spoke two words that sent a chill through the room. "Burn it." Far from Earth, deep in the void, a single stealth cruiser drifted toward its target. The HSS Shadowblade, Earth's deadliest Black Ops vessel, had a mission: infiltrate the Black Maw, identify enemy operations, and cripple them from within. Captain Rena Kale stood at the helm, watching as her ship maneuvered through the asteroid field surrounding the criminal stronghold. "We're in position," her pilot murmured. Rena's gaze never wavered. "Deploy the Ghost Team." In the lower decks, a squad of elite operatives, Earth's most lethal warriors, readied themselves. They wore advanced exosuits designed for stealth and survival in hostile environments. Their leader, Commander Vance, checked his gear before giving the signal. Within seconds, the team was launched into space, their suits rendering them nearly invisible as they drifted toward the Black Maw. As they approached, the stronghold loomed before them, a massive collection of stolen ships, shattered debris, and repurposed space stations, all fused together into a nightmarish fortress. And inside, the galaxy's worst killers were waiting. Vance and his team moved like shadows through the structure, bypassing security drones, disabling surveillance feeds, and planting explosive charges in key locations. As they reached the core of the Black Maw, they found what they were looking for: a massive war room filled with mercenaries, strategists, and Zarkan officers. At the center of it all stood Drezek the Reaper. He was a monstrous figure, standing nearly 7 feet tall, his body enhanced with cybernetic augmentations. His crimson eyes scanned the room as his lieutenants reported on the upcoming campaign against Earth. "The humans think they're invincible," one of the Zarkan generals sneered. "They have no idea what's coming for them." Drezek's lips curled into a grin. "That's what makes this fun." But before another word could be spoken, a silent alarm flickered on a nearby console. Drezek's eyes narrowed. "We have intruders." Before the enemy could react, the first explosion detonated, shaking the entire stronghold. Alarms blared. Lights flickered. Chaos erupted. Vance and his team struck from the darkness, moving with precision and speed. Silent gunfire, suppressed blades, and explosive traps tore through the mercenaries before they could mount a proper defense. Drezek, however, was no fool. He activated his personal shield and grabbed a massive plasma blade from his side. "Find them," he roared. "Kill them all." The Black Maw was now a battlefield. Rena watched from the shadow blade, monitoring the situation through her team's feeds. She had one final order to give: initiate orbital strike. From above, the shadow blade's cannons powered up, targeting the core of the fortress. The war had just begun, but humanity was making sure their enemies understood one thing: they were not prey. They were the storm. The Black Maw was burning. The sky above the asteroid fortress was alive with fire and debris as the HSS Shadowblade rained destruction from orbit. Explosions rippled through the structure, tearing through corridors and collapsing entire sections of the stronghold. Inside, chaos reigned. Mercenaries and Zarkan warriors scrambled for cover, firing wildly at shadows as the ghost team moved through the wreckage like death itself. Commander Vance and his operatives had done what they came to do: cripple the enemy's war machine before it could be unleashed against Earth. But there was still one loose end: Drezhik the Reaper. Drezhik was no ordinary warlord. He had survived 100 battles, crushed entire civilizations, and built his empire on the bones of the fallen. He would not die so easily. Through the smoke and fire, he stood at the heart of the stronghold, his plasma blade humming in his grip, his crimson eyes scanning for his prey. His lieutenants were either dead or dying. His fleet was being torn apart. And yet he grinned. "You think this is over?" His voice echoed through the comm channels. "You think your little strike team has won?" Vance, crouched behind cover, didn't respond. His team had already extracted critical data: enemy fleet positions, invasion blueprints, the names of every warlord who had pledged allegiance to the Zarkans. Mission complete. But there was one last objective: eliminate Drezhik. "Commander," came Captain Rena's voice over comms, "Shadowblade is reaching maximum strike limits. We need to pull out now." Vance glanced at the glowing red indicators on his helmet display. The station was minutes away from complete collapse. He could leave now. Or he could finish this. "You go," he said. "I'll handle Drezhik." His team hesitated, but they knew better than to argue. One by one, they disappeared into the shadows, heading for the extraction point. Drezhik chuckled, stepping forward, his massive cybernetic frame gleaming under the emergency lights. "Brave," he said, "or foolish?" Vance rose from cover, activating his wrist blade and sidearm. "Let's find out." The warlord moved first, launching forward with terrifying speed. His plasma blade slashed through the air, forcing Vance to roll aside as molten metal sizzled where he had stood a second ago. Vance fired 3 quick shots, 2 at Drezhik's exposed torso, 1 at his augmented knee. The first 2 bounced off his energy shield. The third struck true. Drezhik snarled as his left knee buckled slightly, but he didn't fall. Instead, he lunged again, faster this time. Vance barely dodged in time. Their battle raged through the collapsing fortress, weaving through burning hallways and shattered control rooms. Sparks rained down as overhead beams collapsed. Fire belched from broken pipes, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Drezhik fought like an unstoppable force. Each swing of his plasma blade left deep scars in the walls, each step shaking the ground beneath him. Vance fought like a ghost, darting in and out, striking weak points, always staying one step ahead. But he knew time was running out. His ammunition was low. His suit was damaged. And Drezhik. Drezhik was still standing. "You can't kill me, human," the warlord growled. "I was forged in war. I am war." Vance didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his belt and activated his last resort: a micro-singularity charge. The tiny device pulsed in his palm, a weapon powerful enough to collapse the entire section of the station. Drezhik saw it and laughed. "Desperate, are we?" Vance smirked. "Just making sure you stay dead." Then he threw the charge. The warlord had a second to react. He swung his blade to deflect it, but Vance was already moving, tackling him just as the device detonated. For a brief moment, everything froze. The air warped. The walls twisted. Then reality snapped back, and the entire chamber imploded. Trezik's roar was lost in the deafening collapse. Vance hit the ground hard, rolling through fire and debris. His HUD flickered with warnings: oxygen low, armor integrity failing, emergency extraction required. Through the smoke, he saw the docking bay ahead. His team's shuttle waiting, engines hot. He forced himself up, every muscle screaming in protest. Behind him, the black maw was caving in, consumed by explosions. Trezik was gone. The warlord of nightmares had finally fallen. The shuttle door slammed shut as Vance collapsed inside. His team pulled him into a seat, securing his injuries as the pilot launched them into the void. From above, they watched as the black maw crumbled, consumed by fire and gravitational collapse. The greatest hive of scum in the galaxy was no more. Vance let out a slow breath, staring at the destruction. "That's one less threat," Rena said over comms. "But the war isn't over." No, it wasn't. But tonight, humanity had sent a message. Touch our allies, and you will burn. The galaxy had changed. With the destruction of the Black Maw and the death of Trezik the Reaper, the tides of war had shifted. Fear rippled through the ranks of the Zarkan Empire. Their strongest warlord had fallen, not to another alien force, but to humans. And humanity's warning had been clear. Touch our allies, and you will burn. But the fight was far from over. Across the cosmos, Zarkan fleets regrouped, their leaders seething with rage, determined to make the humans pay for their defiance. Skirmishes erupted along the outer colonies. Sabotage attempts increased, and whispers of a greater retaliation began spreading through the stars. Humanity had won a battle. Now they had to survive the war. Deep within the Terran Alliance headquarters, on a hidden moon far from enemy eyes, the most powerful figures of humanity gathered in a war council. Admirals, generals, intelligence officers, and world leaders sat in tense silence as holographic battle maps flickered before them. Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane stood at the center, his grizzled face illuminated by the blue glow of the star charts. His voice was low, steady, but carried the weight of years of battle. "They will retaliate," he said. "We all know this. The question isn't if, it's when and how." "Let them come," growled General Sato, the head of ground forces. "We'll crush them like we did at Black Maw." "It won't be that simple," chimed in Dr. Evelyn Kerr, chief strategist. "The Zarkans don't just wage war. They erase civilizations. If they bring their full force, Earth could be turned to dust." Silence fell. No one doubted her words. Everyone in that room knew what had happened to the Drownians, a species that had once stood against the Zarkans, just as humanity did now. Their homeworld was now a graveyard. Admiral Kane exhaled slowly. "Then we need to hit them before they hit us." A murmur ran through the room. Preemptive strikes had been considered before, but never on this scale. "We have intelligence on their next move," said Commander Vance, stepping forward. He was still recovering from his battle with Trezik, but his mind was sharp as ever. He activated a new holofeed, displaying intercepted Zarkan transmissions. "They're preparing a world killer fleet." The room tensed. World killers, massive dreadnoughts capable of obliterating planets in hours. If they were coming for Earth, then the war would be over before it even began. Admiral Kane's jaw tightened. "Where?" Vance zoomed in on a star system on the map. The Scar Nebula. "They're assembling their fleet there, hidden behind ion storms. But they're not expecting an attack." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Kane's face. "Then that's exactly what we'll give them." Within days, the Terran Alliance launched Operation Ragnarok. The fleet moved swiftly, warping through space, under the cover of electromagnetic disturbances to avoid Zarkan detection. Every soldier, pilot, and officer aboard knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another mission. This was a fight for survival. As the human warships emerged from hyperspace, the Scar Nebula unfolded before them. a swirling chaos of lightning storms and asteroid fields. And at its center, the Zarkan world killer fleet loomed like a nightmare made real. Gargantuan warships bristling with weapons. Legions of fighters and battlecruisers standing in formation. The sight would have broken lesser warriors, but not humanity. Admiral Kane's voice rang through the fleet. All ships, engage. The void exploded with fire. Human destroyers weaved through enemy lines, unleashing barrages of plasma torpedoes. Carrier ships deployed wave after wave of strike fighters, dogfighting in the storm-ridden darkness. Battlecruisers locked onto enemy dreadnoughts, tearing through shields with railgun blasts. And at the heart of it all, Vance and the Ghost Team. While the main fleet kept the Zarkans occupied, they launched a covert assault on the command dreadnought. Their mission was simple: disable the fleet's primary control system, a cybernetic hub that connected the world killers into a single war engine. If they could shut it down, they could turn the tide of war. The infiltration was brutal. Zarkan sentries patrolled every corridor, their bio-augmented bodies towering over the human operatives. One mistake meant certain death. But the Ghost Team moved like shadows. One by one, they eliminated enemy officers, hacked security barriers, and fought their way deeper into the warship's core. Vance led the charge, his pulse rifle humming with each precise shot. Every step was another second closer to either victory or death. Then they reached the neural core, a pulsating sphere of energy linked directly to the Zarkan command network. It was the mind that controlled the war fleet. They had 2 minutes before the fleet realized what was happening. Vance planted the detonator charges while his team uploaded a virus into the system, corrupting the Zarkan war protocols. The countdown began. 1 minute left. Rena shouted, covering the entrance as alarms blared through the dreadnought. Vance activated the final sequence. Let's move. The team ran. Zarkan warriors flooded the corridors, firing wildly as the Ghost Team sprinted for their extraction point. Behind them, the neural core pulsed erratically, its systems crashing, its control over the world killer fleet breaking apart. Then, detonation. A blinding shockwave tore through the dreadnought, consuming everything in its path. And with it, the entire Zarkan fleet collapsed. From space, the battle shifted in an instant. The massive world killers went dark, their systems unresponsive. Humanity seized the moment. Warships pushed forward, bombarding the enemy's crippled fleet. The once mighty armada that had threatened Earth was now nothing more than a scattered graveyard of fire and wreckage. When the last Zarkan warship fell, cheers erupted through the Terran fleet. They had won. Not just a battle. Not just a war. They had ensured the survival of humanity. But even in victory, Admiral Kane's face remained grim as he looked at the burning remains of the Zarkan fleet. "This isn't the end," he muttered. Vance, standing beside him, nodded. "No," he agreed, "but they'll think twice before ever touching our allies again." And somewhere, in the vast darkness of space, new threats were already beginning to rise. Because war never truly ends. It only waits.